the hidden systems shaping our kids' lives and why we barely see them. Hey, ambassadors, we're here to talk about the robot revolution today, so strap in. We all know we're raising kids in a world where their childhood is being shaped, not just by us, not just by their teachers or their friends, but by systems we can't see. The trouble is knowing what to do about it. As I like to say, and you'll hear me say it again, it's not going anywhere. Those systems, algorithms, data, every swipe, tap, glance, click, and read being watched, design choices made by people we will probably never meet being used to keep us swiping, tapping, watching, and clicking. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Really, most of us are doing what we think we're supposed to do to limit our kids and our own exposure. We're tracking screen time, we're checking apps, we're having the be safe online conversations, and still, it can feel like we're missing something. Like the ground is shifting underneath us just a little bit faster than we can keep up with. So today, we're slowing that down. If this show helps you feel a little less alone in figuring all of this out, take a second to share it, because these conversations really do travel parent to parent. Today's guest is Shamika Bradley. She's a consultant working in the AI accessibility and ethics space, focusing on how these systems are actually built and what they're doing to our kids. She's also a mom, which means this isn't theoretical for her. This conversation is honest, a little unsettling at times, but also really grounding. Because once you understand what's happening behind the screen, you start to see where you actually have power. So Shamika, thank you so much for being here on Speaking of Kids.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to discuss this topic. It's actually a really emotional topic to me, so I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're a mom, and just to kick things off, when you look at kids and how they live online, what worries you the most about it?
We're living in a world where this generation is not the first, but it's like a really first generation of kids that are growing up where their childhood is being shaped almost fully with algorithms. And so that is a huge impact on how our kids are, their identity and what they look at, what they like, and how they dress and things like that is coming from, it used to come from our community and our parents and things that are around us, where now it's being shaped from millions of people across the world. So I don't think kids understand that and have that connection of how that impact is been affected on them. So again, that worries me. And so what that also entails is the invisibility architecture. And so I don't want to get too technical on you, but they don't see that the companies are collecting their behavioral data. They're collecting the data that's associated with how long they're on a site, what they're viewing on the site. If they click from this app to this app, if they are doing these things, how are they engaging online? They don't understand that all of that is being impacted. And parents don't as well. They don't understand. It's not just likes and photos that's their digital footprint. It's all of that. How your kid is looking and how long they look at a certain topic, right? That is being collected. So that worries me, right? Because we don't have the full policy around that yet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. On the flip side, what gives you hope when it comes to how kids engage online?
What gives me hope are the kids themselves. I am so amazed at the rapid pace that these kids can learn with the vast amount of technology that's around them. And then their just eagerness to adopt it in a normal fashion, right? Like you had kids that are less than 2 years old trying to figure out how to connect their Wi-Fi. Don't let their iPad go down and they can't get to their video stream or something. They'll figure out how to get that Wi-Fi going or their Bluetooth going. And so the fact that it's a part of their environment so early on, it can be really useful if used in the right way.
About 15 years ago, I served as a fundraising consultant for, by definition, it was a technology company. And what we would do even back then was using data to predict behavioral outcomes, in this case, someone's propensity, to donate or to be interested in a high luxury, yacht or whatever the client needed. And at that time, I was blown away by the power of data and how in isolation, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when aggregated, it can blow your mind. And so I think even now, to your point, adults don't even necessarily understand what the magnitude of that looks like unfolded. But beyond that, and specifically, for this conversation, kids have no idea. From a kid's first perspective, what do you think parents and policymakers are still getting wrong about the risks and the benefits of social media, gaming, and AI tools for kids? Because the one thing that I say, throughout my conversations and as it comes up within our policy team is it's not going away. Like this isn't something that we can just say, oh, okay, this is scary. Let's kind of put it back in a box. It's out here. So what are we missing?
Don't ignore it. That is very dangerous if you ignore or try to put the responsibility on others. You just can't do that. It's a community. It takes a effort of policymakers, of parenting, of community, of businesses as well, right? So I think the biggest mistake that I see is basically the conversation framing or how the conversations are being framed around this. Technology, usually is either technology is dangerous or it should be restricted. Or, people lean to the other end of, oh, it's fun, it has to be here, just watch and supervision. That's not quite it. It's way more complicated than that. Sometimes parents can get caught up on focusing on screen time, right? Using that metric to kind of control, okay, if I don't give you too much screen time, then you won't be too reliant on the technology. And while I do understand that, but I don't think it's necessarily the screen time itself. I think it's the context of what you're using while you have access to the screen. And I don't want to, alarm, but this is the real thing. If you are given 10 minutes on a platform that's promoting in the background some type of eating disorder or something like that, that's harmful, that's way more dangerous than, 10 minutes or 2 hours building a game with friends in overseas or, in another country. So it's not necessarily the amount of time you're spending. It's what the content, what are you accessing? What are they able to utilize? So parents, I would love to maybe shift that attention more on being intentional what they're accessing and ensuring that, those risks are minimized. Policy makers, on the other hand, I just really want them to focus more on the things that aren't so visible. Goes back to the data. Right now, we focus on the things that are really visible as far as the exploitations and all of the negative aspects of just being on the internet itself. There are some quieter things that, we have to focus on getting that behavioral data. One of the things I'm like the data extraction, right? The attention manipulation, right? These are things that companies are actually utilizing and how to, better promote tools to your kid. And what is that doing? Is that eroding boredom? Is that get rid of daydreaming with children? You actually need that for cognitive development, right? So we don't want to overdo it. But I really do think that policy is more aspects than the dangers of it. Parents and policymakers almost have to keep in mind that kids first design, right? Asking not is it legal? Can we do this? Am I meeting the checkbox of legality? We understand that there can be loopholes and things you can get around, but more focusing on does this genuinely serve the child? Is technology changing childhood or enhancing it?
That's a good question because I know for me, it's definitely tracking the things that you outlined. It's like, okay, screen time and, access to certain platforms. And I try to talk to the kids a lot around online safety, but just broader to some of the things that you mentioned, how can families talk to their kids and, kids in their communities about things like, sextortion, cyberbullying, online gambling, and, predictive marketing, kind of all these things that are beyond their frame, and even again, I think it takes some education even on the end of parents and teachers and policymakers for sure.
Mhm.
What are age appropriate ways, but still being honest and proactive? What tools do you have for parents?
One, I would always say, and this isn't, I hope I'm not coming off as too judgmental this way, but let's not allow technology to fully raise our kids, right? Let's use it as a tool. And so many kids, I notice they stay silent online. It's not because they don't trust their parents, it's because they're actually afraid that they'll lose a device or get in trouble, right? And so that's not the motivator to want to tell or to want to speak up because they trust and you have a wonderful relationship probably, but they don't want to lose their device. The important choice is actually just keeping the door open before something actually goes wrong, before there is an impact or something happens. And so what does that look like, right? Let's have the conversations around safety rather than punishment. For younger children, that may look like saying sometimes people online pretend to be something they're not. And if anything ever makes you uncomfortable, you can always tell me, right? I'm always here to talk about these things. And as a parent, you have to understand that these conversations are going to come up and they may be awkward and uncomfortable and you just have to have them. And that's okay. This is the environment that they're in. I use that approach for younger children because, the age level and maturity that they can understand. However, when I get to my teenagers, that conversation is more
Mm.
direct. That conversation is more explain how scams work, explain what sextortion is, explain what actually online pressure looks like. Show them in their media, in their way, videos or, conversations, research these conversations, use AI tools to help you bridge the gap to have these conversations as well. I don't think you should sugarcoat these conversations. You really have to, I'm not saying scare them, but you really have to explain to them the dangers that are associated with their age group operating in that environment. So kids can understand.
They can. And you know what I find so fascinating is, so my kids are younger,
Mhm.
but they tend to know, like if something's AI generated, they can spot it. And
Yep.
so that does give me some level of reassurance, because really it's
Mhm.
like the distinction between what is real and what's fake, and to have
Yep.
an appreciation of both, but also again to just really be able to know.
Yeah.
And also it's been interesting to have either direct conversations with like young adults or older teens, or having colleagues that have children that fall into this bucket. And some of their takes on AI are actually really interesting. Like some of my initial feedback, they've actually rejected it, and I found that to be very interesting because again, the same way that when we were growing up, for us
Mhm.
millennials, like, we grew up in a time where we had dial up, we had life before the internet. And so when the
Yeah.
internet came, there were all of these scares, or not scares, but like people were anxious.
Yep.
So it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out, even in terms of national conversations and conversations within community.
I mean, with children, I'm not asking you to be, extra graphic when you're having the conversations, right? But you have to explain to them that sometimes people do not have your best interests at heart and they will try to trick you into sharing private photos or they will try to shame you into doing certain things. And that's where your morals and your, values kick in. You let your child know that, this is what we are and this is who we are and this is the type of things that we do and this is what the respect that you want to have for yourself, right? Because these things, they don't go away. You can delete them, but if someone screenshot it or it's on someone's server potentially, so they don't go away.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, as AI shows up in homework, as like, homework helpers, I know my daughter will sometimes ask, like, Alexa, how do you spell? Or chatbots, toys, even school tools. What are
Hmm.
the specific risks and opportunities for children that you wish were at the center of our public conversation rather than, sometimes you hear a partisan back and forth, right? Or like we're going to lean in on all tech or no tech.
See, I think because I am on the optimistic side of technology. I've just been in this industry for, I don't want to date it, but just as it's grown, right? I've seen it grown from infancy stages and I see the value. So the value of technology is, I always look at it as almost an opportunity, and there are some risks associated with it, threats as well. But just imagine AI tutoring tools, when well designed, they could be an equalizer in education. Sometimes you may can't afford a private Mandarin tutor, or sometimes your economic status cannot afford some of the resources that can probably close some plenty economic gaps or economical gaps that will help you. Education is one of the main resources that allow you to do that. And so if you think about a child in maybe in a rural town that doesn't have access to potentially a community like them, that can bridge that gap. So we always want to ensure that we are exploiting those opportunities. Another way is when an AI tool like completes a child essay, we got to understand that The way children are going to learn, it's not the way that we learn. And I've had these conversations where they say, well, they're missing the fundamentals. They're missing the fundamentals. I think they're getting them in a different aspect. They're getting them different way where we went A, B, C, they may do a conglomerate of A, B, C, D, E together, and they learn it in that aspect and withdraw from a critical reasoning perspective, right? Where we had to go 1, 2, 3, 4, it's not like that for them. And so I just feel like, we have to open up that conversation and ensuring that, yes, these tools can be used in an environment and it could potentially lead to, cheating and things like that. However, let's utilize a tool in a different way. Are we doing critical reasoning when we're using the tool? So it eliminates the opportunity to be impacted by that. Another thing about biases. Tools have biases associated with them. And so if your child's primary source is that information, then it may be impacting them from a bias perspective or even giving them certain biases that are not necessarily supported by your family values and morals. So we want to be conscious on those things as well. And then also surveillance creep in school. And so, these are risks. The AI proctoring tools, things like that, emotional behavior prediction, some of those tools are not designed with every demographic, without the biases that are associated with developing these tools, right? So when a system learns and then say it's on data that has biases included in that data, it's going to make recommendations that are no longer applicable to the child. It's going to be recommendation based on bad data. Right. And then someone's going to be hard pressed forcing those recommendations. Could you imagine for like IEPs, recommendations based on, AI environment learning? And so now they're starting to force a connection that isn't there.
I have a colleague at First Focus that is laser focused on this issue because she will go back and forth with ChatGPT or really any of these AI platforms because its read on history and its take on certain things are skewed. However, in her investigative research, when you push back, it will kind of step back and acknowledge and kind of spit out a different frame. However, kids growing up, and this is one thing that I always tell my kids is like, these are all man-made things. Like you can create a robot. Like these are not just definitive things that are accurate across the board, right? Like there's opportunities for it to be wrong and it can be. And so, again, data plays a big role.
Yeah, unconscious biases exist. It's human nature, right? It's how we manage and how we handle those unconscious biases. And that's where people like me come in, ethical managers, to see, hey, let's make sure you have the appropriate protocols in place where this is not limiting a specific target or a specific demographic, or it's making sure it's great for everyone and not just someone.
And that right there is the tension, isn't it? Because we're not talking about technology working. We're talking about who it's working for and who it might be leaving behind. When we come back, we're digging into what the research actually says about harm and the very real ways these platforms could be redesigned with kids in mind. Welcome back, ambassadors. We've been talking about how these AI systems are built and who they're built for. But zooming out a little, we're also seeing a growing number of headlines about what all of this might be doing to kids, especially when it comes to mental health. So I want to go there next. I think it was either a Wall Street Journal or Washington Post article that I read just this week around social media and youth mental health, from anxiety and depression to body image and sleep. When you look at these headlines, what do you see as the most credible evidence of harm? And what are some concrete design changes that platforms could make that would actually put children's well-being first?
I'm gonna be honest about the science here. The research is really complex, right? And it's several layers to things. It's hard to kind of pin down with so many tools and access and everything pouring in at one time, right? But I think we owe it to parents to be pretty accurate and rather than alarmist. I think the most credible evidence of harm comes from like three mechanisms. It's like social comparison. So comparing to things socially, environment, what's around you. Sleep disruption, not being able to get full sleep, want to stay up all night, stay up online, just being interactive, and that you need that appropriate sleep in order to allow your brain, to function. Displacement of in-person connections. And I think we're really impacted with that, with being able to have these in-person connections or just operate together. The correlation studies linking social media use to anxiety and depressions are real because the causality is genuinely debated among researchers, right? But what we can say more of the confidence is that certain design features, like infinite scrolls, lights, late night notifications, and algorithmically amplified beauty and body structures and things that are associated like that, those can have measurable harm. And particularly with adolescent girls. It could give them body conscious issues. It can give them all those things. So, are we sure that that amount of attention that the kids are applying to these type of tools, right? Because again, the companies wants their background behavior data. And that sometimes they can't even get out these infinite loops. And now this is all they're seeing on their timeline and they think this is normal and this is natural. And this is what, should be the standard of beauty. It's difficult.
And just to be clear, I feel like it's difficult for adults, like let
Yeah.
alone children, it's difficult for adults to not have these same outcomes and these same symptoms.
Right. Absolutely. But specifically what design changes could actually help, I would say like a default chronological feeds for users under 18, right? It's just default. No algorithm behind it, not based on it's just who they follow. What was last posted? It's timestamp versus because they looked at this, because they looked at that. So that kind of removes the historical context that's associated with that, trying to feed that algorithm. Just allow them to show what they are already connected to. Meaningful like notifications, off switches, no dark patterns to like bringing you back. Like once it's off, it's off. Let's put those as standard features. Not something you have to turn on, something that you need to opt out of. I honestly think they can minimize the use of like lights, right? The engagement metrics that are visible to minors. Like I don't understand if you're not in the business aspect, why the lights, right? Why do you need that, instant gratification? Because it kind of gives children an opportunity to want to seek for that. And that can be dangerous to get the instant gratification because what happens when they don't get it? Does that affect their self-worth? Does that affect who they are? How do your parent help balance that? That could be a landmine. Let's see. Hard stops, right? No gentle nudges, hard stops. I truly implore parents to you have no technology in the house hours, right? After certain hours, you can't use this app. After a certain time frame, no technology. During this time frame, no technology. But that kids are sponges. So what they see you do is generally they'll think that it's okay, right? And so if you can have a conversation with your child without engaging with your phone, that's how they think normal interaction it should occur. I would say have those conversations with them. Make sure you do not have the interactions or the distractions that are there with technology, and showing them that this time is just as important as the time you want to use, in social media or in engaging with your friends. And I wouldn't always put it around dinner time. It could be, hey, when we first wake up, 2 hours is just us, breakfast, or, whatever that interaction would be. I wouldn't use it for, 2 hours before we go to bed either. Just adjust the time frames. And so but the purpose there would just to ensure that you have that time that you can just disconnect and check out and be okay. It's okay.
That part is to just be okay. Up until this point, we talked a lot about the role of parents and community and teachers and even kids to a degree. But really, we don't design these things. So we don't even know what is possible. This is just a totally different world. I think this is one of those nuances where the research is still kind of new, like from a policy standpoint, right? And I don't think policymakers, just given like the average age of a member of Congress, may not know all the ins and outs of what the best path forward when it comes to online safety, AI, and all the different ways it impacts kids, right? Like health and medical data, education, some of the things that we listed, mental health to a degree. And so I think this is one of those areas where we really are going to need industry experts to really weigh in and be transparent. And in this case, like really put profit and marketability and X, Y, and Z aside to really focus on kids. At first, focus on children, we often say, and this is across the board, not just with technology, is children are often an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
Or they think, oh, okay, with these little tweaks, it'll be fine. They'll be fine. Kids are resilient. But really, I always sound a little cheesy when I say this, but they're 100% of our future. In this country, 25% of our makeup are children. And, globally, that's even higher. And so if you could sit down with leaders of, the big tech companies and ask them to change 3 things about how their products work for kids and teens, what would you put on that list and why?
Let's see, 3 things. I want first, leading with intention. And then these 3 things would follow behind intentionality when you're engaging your target audience, especially if it's children. Okay. Being specific, achievable, and you like genuine structure. So first, default to privacy and safety, not engagement. People shouldn't have to opt in to safety and privacy options. You should opt out. You should say, oh, this is too restricted. I actually want less restriction. You should be able to opt out. Right now, default settings on most platforms are optimized to maximize your time on the platform. Let's flip that. Let's make that safe, privacy protected, chronological notification, limited version. Make that the default. And so parents and teens have to actually opt out of that versus opting in. So that choice for architecture is actually powerful for children, right? It works for them and not against them. So the second thing I would say, be transparent. Open your data to independent researchers. It's interesting. You might start seeing commercials. There was a big landmark case that just actually closed up in March for Meta. It was huge California case, yeah, that just closed out in Meta. And so it'd be interesting to see what actually comes from that. But it kind of supports this as well. But just being that transparency, I think they're going to have to allow people to inside of their service to make sure they're complying with intentions. Just opening your data up to independent researchers, right? Just having audits to ensure that your system is compliant with the privacy associated with children and how they're interacting with you. And it's not the engagement portions of it. It's more associated with just them being available, having that access to the tool, removing the engagement criteria. Kids are going to use it. Their friends are using it. They're going to use your tools. And so, finding a way to just generally be able to have a profit as well, but also having that intentionality and being transparent with your data to ensure that, hey, I'm doing the right thing. You can come in and take a look. Apple actually does that now. People can have the ability to do that because I don't know if you ever use face technology on your phone. They're capturing your pictures of your eyeballs every 3 seconds or something like that. And so what they're doing is they're saying, yes, we capture it, but we don't keep it. We are not keeping it for you to use anything else. We are not using your eye pupils to track where you're going to different sites, right? But maybe other companies are. But Apple is telling you, no, we're not doing this. You can come and take a look at our databases. So that's a pretty cool thing from them. I think their business model supports that effort as well. However, companies that are in marketing, they may not lead to that path. So that's important, just having some type of independent resources that can go and take a look at their background environments. And then I would say, thirdly, remove those addictive design mechanisms from products. Like, why are they designed to children? Are you intensifying addictions within kids? Those reward loops, those infinite scrolls, and streaking the systems to do like exploit lost aversion, like things that they're taking from like behavioral psychology. Why are we doing this? And associating with gambling research, we're starting to see like correlations with online gambling and how our kids are using social media aspects and how they're connected, and it's hard for them to break that cycle. And so I would encourage them to build that in a more intentional manner into understanding your target audience. We shouldn't be using the same models that we're using for gambling sites on children, right? That should be different.
Wow. First of all, I did not know that was a thing where you like your eyeballs. I mean, I'm also one of those people that cannot keep a password right to save my life because there's a million of them. And so anytime there's a
Yep.
default to just use the Face ID, I
Yeah.
do. But I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Because they don't tell you.
See, and that's kind of my point, right? Is like an average consumer is not going to necessarily know that they're tracing and tracking where your eyeballs land on a screen. Like, that's wild.
Yes. Because your intention of how you're thinking about it, you're using the tool. And the tool is convenient for you because why? I don't have to remember another password. So that's what they're going to keep promoting to you, right? Because that's the best use for it. That's the best use. But from their perspective, that doesn't matter to them. To them, it matters that, oh, she used her tool here. She looked here. She looked there. This eye looked here. It went here. Where is it going? How is she looking? Does it scroll down? Is it scrolling up? When I put this type of content on the screen, does her finger match the eye? Like it data. You'd be surprised. You think the things that we capture may not make sense, but when you compile it together and it shows a historical trend, somebody will use it.
Yeah, yeah. Right now, there's a rare bipartisan energy to do something about kids' online safety, but not always agreement on the how. From your vantage point, what are the most promising policy ideas that both parties should be able to agree on, and what guardrails are needed so we don't overreach or unintentionally hurt kids?
I think just mandatory age verification frameworks. So while that's not perfect, but if meaningfully combined with like genuine privacy protection, like verification data itself doesn't become a new surveillance layer, right? We don't want, the government surveilling everything that as far as what we're accessing, what we're looking at, because that could be used as well. So, but we need some mandatory age verification frameworks, right? How are we verifying that the person just click a button? Are you over 18? Yes. Like, that it literally sometimes that is all it is. And that just says that company did a checkbox that they did what was supposed to do, mandated by law. But is that really solving the problem? So figure out a way to do a mandatory age verification. It's possible. But also like data minimization requirements, right? Companies should be able to collect data that is genuinely necessary for the service, right? With specific for protections for minors. Not everything else. What else do you need? Let's be protected of what exactly do you need from our minors and parents, and you should be able to have a voice in that. What do you need from my child? What exactly do you need in order to provide them this tool? The rest of the stuff you do not need, that do not collect it. Algorithm accountability. That goes back to the landmark case that just closed out in March for Meta. Platforms should be required to audit and publish what their systems amplify to users under 18. They need to tell parents, they need to warn policymakers, they need to let folks know what you have access to that's not obvious. What could potentially happen by your child clicking here? What does that look like? I can't tell you. However, it's possible. It needs to be done. And then funding, right? Funding for like digital literacy education. That's low, controversy and high impact. That's a win-win for everyone. And I think that this is a bipartisan thing. It doesn't matter on each side of the aisle. They can come together on these items. And I think it will be, really in the best interest of our children.
Thank you for those very concrete concepts and the case that you just referenced. It's going to be fascinating to see because from my reading, there's thousands more lawsuits waiting to be heard with,
Yeah.
youth internet users at the center of this litigation, from parents, school districts, state attorney generals, all seeking to hold industry accountable. And so the time has come for us to really have a comprehensive conversation before things get crazy on either side. Because I'm sure to a degree, tech industry is not going to want over-regulation, right? And that's not even the answer here. It's really what makes the most sense. And I think in this particular issue, it's going to strike the right balance of thought leaders of all kinds coming together to put together some common sense things, but also just be a little bit more thoughtful in terms of online safety or, technology as it relates to kids.
There was a act floating through Congress, and it just hasn't passed a few times. Kids Online Safety Act, and it would accomplish some of these things. Tech companies all have hard lobbyists, and we just need someone lobbying for our kids. We really do. We need folks lobbying for our kids, and parents have to utilize their consumer impact as well. Do not support a company. I don't think you should support a company that doesn't support your morals and values and what you want your child to have access to. Enforce our Congress, enforce your lawmakers in order to, again, these are bipartisan decisions. we shouldn't be defining what a child is at this point. Okay. There is some legal conversation of what a child is. If we are having these disruptions or partisan conversations, then borrow what other countries are doing. We are overdue for these conversations. We are behind the ball here in the United States. Australia has gone really to a point.
Extreme, isn't it?
It's extreme, but I
Yeah.
understand almost because they're saying you're not mature enough under 16, no social media, right? The EU, they have an act in place that's more flexible, but it puts the ownership on the companies. It's saying, no, you are not disclaimed for this, or you're putting harmful tools out here and you didn't notify and you didn't do the appropriate checks and balances in place to ensure it wasn't impactful. You still can be responsible or accountable for the residuals of that tools. So other countries, and they're moving towards it. Just we have to enforce that this is just as important as other things right now.
Yeah. Shamika, thank you so much for your perspective. This was such a comprehensive, thoughtful conversation that I hope, policymakers, parents, teachers, grandparents can really take a lot away from. My takeaway is kind of like this balance of common sense, balance, understanding, and getting a better sense of what is trackable, having a better sense of data. This was really helpful. And so if you've listened to this podcast, the final question that we always ask folks is, what's the one song that helps you reset or keeps you moving forward to kind of really do what you do?
It's interesting as I was thinking about that as a song. And actually one of my favorite songs is Made Away by Travis Green. And so it really touches to me. It reminds me that breakthroughs often happen in moments when things feel uncertain. And this is a large, uncertain, this space. Advocating for children online sometimes can feel like I'm pushing against a huge system. I'm one person, and I don't have the backing of lobbyists and other things. However, I do know keep the fight going. What's the alternative? You have to believe that the work that you're doing is making an impact and keep moving forward. If it's just one small step, you are moving in the right direction. And I have hope. I really do have hope for the future and the children behind us coming up, that they'll be okay. They really will, even in this new environment that they're coming.
I share that sentiment. And on that note, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Friends, the idea that so much of what's happening shaping our kids' lives right now is invisible. I'm left thinking I can't parent through something I don't understand. I'm not just talking about what they're doing on their screens, but also what's being done to them. So I say it again, we can't parent what we don't understand. But once we start to see it, even a little bit more clearly, we actually have more agency than we think. We can ask better questions, we can shift what we focus on, and we can start pushing together for systems that treat kids like kids, not just users. Speaking of Kids is a podcast by First Focus on Children. It's produced by Windhaven Productions and Blue Jay Atlantic. Elizabeth Wyndham is the supervising producer, Julia Wyndham is the editor, and Jay Woodward is the senior producer. For more about this episode, visit firstfocus.org.